Why do so many people think their automatic Hyundais are invulnerable? So many people think these cars have been built to handle anything they throw at them. Well, think again, because the automatic title doesn't make them immortal. I'm Dean, and after 15 years with my hands buried in engine bays, I've seen more automatic Hyundais killed by their owners than by actual mechanical failure. Not because the owners were stupid, but because they were doing stuff that seemed totally normal. Stuff their buddy told them was fine. Stuff that deep down they probably knew wasn't right but did anyway because hey, it's still moving, right? They just, for some reason, think their automatic Hyundais would always survive. Well, today I'm on a mission to save you from yourself. I'm gonna tell you the things you should never, ever do with your automatic Hyundai. Some of these might make you feel attacked. Every single one of these tips will save you thousands and keep your Hyundai from ending up in a scrapyard somewhere. So grab some coffee and a notepad, and let's get right into it. Starting with something I know so many of you had no clue about until now. I'm starting with mistake number 1. Never help your automatic by shifting into neutral at stoplights. Oh boy, here we go. I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. But Dean, my dad taught me to shift into neutral at red lights to save wear on the transmission. Well, your dad was a wonderful man who meant well, but unfortunately, he was dead wrong when it comes to modern Hyundais. Here's what happens when you habitually shift into neutral at every stoplight. You're actually wearing out your transmission faster. Every time you move that shifter from drive to neutral and back to drive, you're activating solenoids, moving fluid, and causing tiny amounts of wear inside the valve body. Now, imagine doing that like 20 times every single day on your way to and fro work. You're just adding hundreds of unnecessary shift cycles to your transmission's life. I had a customer with a 2012 Elantra who couldn't understand why his transmission started slipping at 90,000 miles. We dropped the pan and found metal shavings everywhere. When I asked about his driving habits, he proudly told me about his neutral at stoplights routine he'd been doing for 8 years. 8 years of unnecessary shifting, 8 years of extra wear. Your Hyundai already has a component designed to handle these stops. That's called the torque converter. It knows what it's doing, and so did the engineers who designed your Hyundai. Let it do its job. Leave it in drive. Mistake 2 is more about stubbornness than misinformation, really. Mistake number 2. Never ignore the transmission overheating warning because you're close. I cannot stress this one enough. If that little warning light comes on, or if your transmission temperature gauge starts creeping into the red, you pull over immediately. Not in 5 minutes. Not when you find a good spot. Right now. There are times to be stubborn. Well, it's never a good time to be stubborn with your transmission. Never. Transmission fluid at 240 degrees starts breaking down. At 260, it might as well be water. At 300 degrees, the seals inside your transmission start literally cooking and turning into brittle plastic. By the time you smell that burnt toast smell, the damage is already done. I remember this one guy who towed a small camper with his Santa Fe. He called me from the side of the highway, frantic. The transmission overheating light had come on about 20 miles back, but he was almost to the campground. He made it right up to the campsite before the transmission gave up completely. That tow bill plus the new transmission cost him more than the camper did. If your Hyundai says it's hot, believe it. Pull over, put it in park, let it idle for 15 minutes, check for fluid leaks. Do whatever you need to do, but for the love of all that's mechanical, do not keep driving. Next up is a mistake we've all made at some point, but hey, I'm not judging. Next up is mistake number 3. Never floor it when the transmission is cold. Look, I get it. You're late for work. You get in your Elantra, fire it up, and immediately stomp on it to merge onto the highway. We've all done it. But here's what's happening inside your transmission when you do that. Automatic transmission fluid is thick when it's cold. It doesn't flow as well, it doesn't lubricate as well, it doesn't provide the same hydraulic pressure that your transmission needs to shift properly. When you hammer the throttle on a cold transmission, you're asking those clutches to grab hold and transfer power while they're not getting enough lubrication or pressure. They slip, they glaze over. What I'm talking about here is metal grinding against metal. That's never good, and in the end, they wear out prematurely. I had a kid bring in his 2018 Elantra Sport with 40,000 miles, complaining that the transmission was slipping between second and third gear. When I asked about his morning routine, he admitted he lived about a mile from the highway on-ramp. Start car, drive 1 mile, floor it to merge. He did that every single day for 2 years. Those cold, brutal launches had glazed the clutches so badly they couldn't hold anymore. It was time for a new transmission and an expensive lesson. Give your Hyundai 5 minutes to warm up before you ask it to perform. Your transmission fluid needs to be at least warm before you start making demands. Yeah, your car is still a machine, but a little care never hurt anyone. Mistake number 4. Never use park as your emergency brake. This one drives me absolutely nuts, and I see it pretty much everywhere. Let me paint you this little scene. You park your Hyundai on a hill, you shift into park, you turn off the car, you get out, you never touch the parking brake, and that's it. Well, right now, it doesn't sound like much, but there's a lot more to what you've just done. Here's what's happening inside your transmission when you do that. That little metal pawl that locks your transmission when you're in park, it's about the size of your finger. It's designed to hold your car on a flat surface. When you park on a hill and rely solely on that pawl, you're asking that little piece of metal to hold thousands of pounds of vehicle against gravity. What do you think is going to happen? Can't figure it out? Well, let me help you. Every time you do this, you're stressing that pawl. You're also stressing the parking gear it locks into. Over time, that pawl can wear down. The gear can develop stress fractures. And one day, you might come back to find your Hyundai has rolled down the hill and into someone's front yard. Let's not even go thinking about just how much trouble you're in if that happens. I've got a better routine for you. Here's what you do instead. Set your parking brake before you shift into park. Hold the foot brake, set the parking brake, then shift into park. That way, the parking brake holds the weight of the car, not your transmission. Your transmission just acts as a backup. Do this every single time, even on flat ground. It becomes a habit, and your transmission lives longer. Don't forget this. I've got yet another mistake that's got stubbornness written all over it. Mistake number 5. Never ignore the check engine light. Oh, this one. I'll never stop singing about the importance of that little light. Could it be annoying? 100%. But there aren't up to 5 other components as important as your check engine light. Your Hyundai's check engine light comes on. The car still drives fine. Maybe it feels a tiny bit sluggish, but nothing major. So you figure it's probably just some emissions thing, and you'll get to it eventually. Eventually becomes never. And then, one day, your transmission is no more. Here's what you don't know. Modern Hyundais use electronic throttle control. When something goes wrong with the engine, the computer often puts the transmission into a sort of limp mode to protect itself. It might shift differently. It might hold gears longer. It might engage clutches differently. You might not even notice, but your transmission is now operating outside its normal parameters. I had a lady bring in her 2016 Tucson with 110,000 miles. Check engine light had been on for about 8,000 miles. She finally brought it in because the transmission was acting up. Turns out her oxygen sensor had failed, causing the engine to run rich. That extra fuel was washing past the piston rings and diluting her engine oil. That diluted oil was getting into the transmission cooler and contaminating her transmission fluid. By the time she brought it in, the transmission was filled with thin, fuel-smelling fluid that couldn't protect anything. The oxygen sensor would have cost $200 to fix. The transmission cost $4,500. As much as it might annoy you, that check engine is not a suggestion. Stop taking it as such. It's your car screaming for help. Listen to it. Mistake number 6. Never neutral. Drop your Hyundai. I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently I do. I've seen it more than once. But first, I'll have to tell you all what a neutral drop is. For those who don't know, a neutral drop is when you rev the engine in neutral and then slam it into drive. People do this to show off, to impress their friends, to feel like a Fast and Furious character for like 2.5 seconds before their transmission dies. Many of you do this without even knowing what it's called, what's really happening under your hood, or the adverse effects it has on your car. Well, don't worry, I'll be covering all bases real quick. Let me start by telling you what happens inside when you do this. You see, that sudden engagement sends a shockwave through your entire drivetrain. The input shaft, the clutches, the bands, the planetary gears, all of them get hit with a force they were never designed to handle. It's like dropping a cinder block on a glass table. Sure, it might survive once, might even survive twice, but eventually that glass is shattering into a million pieces. That's the same with your Hyundai's drivetrain when you make neutral dropping a habit. So I'm really sorry to be a buzzkill right now, but don't do neutral drops, ever. Not once. Yeah, it might be a world of fun. I wouldn't even know, but you're putting your Hyundai at risk, a really expensive risk. Mistake number 7. Never ignore transmission fluid leaks. It starts with a few drops on your garage floor. Then one day, it becomes a puddle. And that puddle becomes, why is my transmission making that noise? At this point, the damage has already been done. Transmission fluid is the lifeblood of your automatic. Without enough of it, the pump starts sucking air. Air in the fluid means the fluid can't build pressure. No pressure means the clutches can't engage properly. They slip, they burn, they die. I had a guy bring in his 2014 Sonata complaining that the transmission was slipping. I got it up on the lift and found the entire underside coated in a fine mist of transmission fluid. Turns out a cooler line had been leaking for months. He'd noticed spots on his driveway, but he thought it was just condensation from the AC. In the winter, in Michigan, it was so obvious that it wasn't. What really happened was that his Sonata's transmission was bleeding out. We refilled it and replaced the line, but the damage was done. The clutches were glazed from running low on fluid for so long. 6 months later, he was back for a full rebuild. Let's skip the part where I tell you just how much that cost him. Hint: it was a whole lot. Bottom line, if you see red fluid under your car, that's not condensation. That's not rainwater. That's your transmission telling you it's dying. Bring it into the shop the second you notice the leak. Your mechanic has got some work to do. Next up is one you're not going to want to believe. In fact, a couple of you are going to see it and think I'm making it all up. But I promise you, I've seen this kill more Hyundais than just about anything else on this list. Next up, mistake number 8. Running on empty, running your car low on fuel. Like consistently letting that light come on and driving another 30 miles before filling up. I know. It doesn't sound like a transmission killer, it sounds like a "I'm too lazy to stop for gas" problem. But here's what's actually happening inside your Hyundai when you run on fumes, and why your automatic transmission is silently screaming every time you do it. Your Hyundai's fuel pump lives inside the gas tank. It's submerged in fuel for a reason. That fuel acts as a coolant. It keeps the pump from overheating and destroying itself. When you run low on gas, your fuel pump starts sucking air. It starts working harder. It starts getting hotter. And here's where the transmission comes in. On most modern Hyundais, the transmission cooler shares space with the engine cooling system. When your engine starts working harder because of fuel starvation, when your pump starts failing and your engine runs lean, that extra heat goes right into the transmission fluid. But it gets even worse. The worst part is what lives at the bottom of your gas tank. Sediment, rust particles, gunk, all the nasty stuff that settles at the bottom because it's heavier than gas. When you run low, your fuel pump starts sucking up that sludge. That sludge goes through your fuel filter, and if your filter is even slightly clogged, it restricts fuel flow. Restricted fuel flow means your engine runs lean. Lean means hot. Hot means your transmission cooler can't keep up. And one day, you'll be saying bye-bye to your transmission and hello to an unbelievable repair bill. Every single step in this running on empty chain inevitably leads to the death of your transmission, and you'll never see it coming. Your car doesn't throw a code until it's too late. The transmission doesn't start acting up until the damage is done. By the time you notice anything wrong, you're looking at a rebuild or replacement. Here's what I tell every Hyundai owner who walks into my shop. Never let it get below a quarter tank. I don't care if gas prices are high. I don't care if you're almost there. I don't care if you're trying to squeeze every last mile out of a tank. A quarter tank is your warning. A quarter tank is your safety zone. When that needle hits a quarter, you find a gas station. Why a quarter? Because at a quarter tank, your fuel pump is still fully submerged. It's still getting cooled. It's not sucking up the sludge from the bottom. Your engine is getting clean, consistent fuel pressure. Your engine stays at the right temperature. Your transmission cooler does its job. Everything stays happy. Mistake number 9. Never shift into park while the car is still rolling. I see this one constantly, usually in drive-thrus. Someone's in a hurry, they pull up to the window, and before the car has fully stopped, they've already jammed the shifter into park. Sometimes it makes that horrible grinding noise, sometimes it doesn't. But either way, damage is happening. That parking pole I told you about earlier? The little finger-sized piece of metal that locks your transmission? When you shift into park while the car is still moving, you're asking that tiny pole to stop several thousand pounds of moving vehicle. It's not designed for that, as I said earlier. It's designed to hold a stationary car in place. Here's the rule. Your car needs to be at a complete dead stop before park happens. Not almost stopped. Not rolling so slow it doesn't matter. Stopped. Period. That extra half-second of patience saves you from buying a new transmission. Mistake number 10. Never tow heavy loads without understanding your Hyundai's limits. Alright, let me tell you about a conversation I have at least once a year. Somebody rolls into my shop with a Santa Fe or a Tucson hitched up to a trailer that looks like it's meant for a full-size truck. They're proud. They're ready for a weekend of camping or hauling or whatever, and they always ask the same thing. Dean, think my Hyundai can handle this? What they mean is, please tell me yes so I don't have to rent a truck. I'm not going to lie to them. Here's the thing about Hyundai towing ratings. They exist. They're in your manual somewhere, and almost nobody reads them. Your Santa Fe might be rated to tow 2,000 pounds. Sounds great, right? That's a decent little trailer. But here's what the manual doesn't scream from the rooftops. That rating assumes you're towing at sea level, on flat ground, in moderate temperatures, with zero cargo in the car, and with a transmission that's in perfect health. Real-world towing, that 2,000 pounds might as well be 5,000 by the time you factor in mountain grades, summer heat, and the fact that you've also got your family and their luggage inside the car. When you tow with an automatic Hyundai, especially the ones without a dedicated transmission cooler, you're asking your transmission fluid to do something it wasn't designed for. Absorb and dissipate massive amounts of heat over and over for hours at a time. Here's what I tell every Hyundai owner who asks about towing. First, find out what your car is actually rated for, not what you hope it's rated for. What the door jamb sticker and the manual say. Second, cut that number in half for regular towing. If it says 2,000 pounds, pretend it says 1,000. That's how you take care of your transmission. Third, if you're going to tow anything more than a small utility trailer with some lawn chairs, install an aftermarket transmission cooler. They're not expensive, they're not hard to install, and they're the difference between a transmission that lasts and a transmission that leaves you stranded. Do all 3 of these, and you should be good to go. Alright, 10 mistakes later, and I think your automatic Hyundai has all it needs to serve you for a long time. But they're not delicate flowers, you know. They're actually pretty tough. But tough doesn't mean indestructible. Tough means they can take a beating and keep going. It doesn't mean they can take abuse and keep going forever. Always remember this.